And Sandy, you said something up there that this is not a job I would have taken anywhere. Why? And what did you mean by that?
Well, I just think that all the elements are here. It's a great franchise with tremendous upside potential in a great location, passionate fans, brand new ballpark that people have taken to, and the resources to be competitive with anybody. So as long as we use those resources wisely, there's no reason that we can't be consistently successful. So that's not true a lot of places. And so from that standpoint, this is just a great opportunity for me.
You obviously had to do your homework coming in for these interviews. Yeah. And just give us an idea. I know you can't tell us everything, but give us an idea about what you found about this organization, what your thoughts are as an outsider about this organization right now.
Well, as an outsider, you'd like to see a franchise like the Mets in the playoffs or close to the playoffs every year. And that's true of other franchises, not only in this area but other places in our division and elsewhere. So we ought to be one of those 4 or 5 teams that are always within striking distance. That's going to require, I think, an upgrade in our player development system. Again, in the totality, we need to be in the top 4 or 5. With respect to each element, player development, scouting, and so forth, we need to be in the top 5. And if we can achieve those things by department, we're going to achieve, our ultimate goal as well. So at the major league level, as I've said, a little boxed in with payroll right now, but we'll go into 11 with what we have or explore the market for what we have and try to put the best possible team on the field. And I'm still optimistic about 2011.
Before I get to the payroll, and I want to get that, as you're talking about the organization, you said, pretty honest, you said, hey, I think right now we're middle of the pack.
Right.
How hard is it, or maybe not that hard, to go from the middle to, say, the top 5 in terms of upgrading the entire system?
It doesn't have to take that long.
Yeah.
A quality draft or 2 and things can turn around. Some quality signings in the international market, things can turn around in a hurry. Now, that typically brings in talent at the low end, not the top end. And so you have to wait a while for that talent to develop. And we need to be in a position where we have enough depth in the system so that we can allow players to develop at the appropriate pace rather than rushing them. Because even if they've got great talent, they don't necessarily learn how to play the game in such a short period of time. So, but in order to have the luxury of doing that, you've got to have enough prospects in the system. The other thing is that you want a mix of high-end players, but also solid, dependable, everyday guys that give you the kind of depth that you need if you have an injury. If you look at some of the teams, I look at San Diego this year, and they didn't have a lot of great players, but they had a lot of players that could play, knew how to play the game, solid major league players. And the thing about solid major league players is that you never know the ones. You never know who's going to turn out to be great.
Sure.
We're going to work hard at sort of every aspect of it. But I do think that a farm system can improve pretty dramatically. But you got to put some back-to-back drafts together.
Yeah, this doesn't sound like, though, it's something that will take 10 years if it's done right. Now, let's talk about this year. You're talking about, maybe little handcuffs on the payroll. We know it's high right now, and there are a lot of expiring contracts. Can you describe what it's like, though? I believe you talked about being smart in the free agent market, being, you didn't use this word, but thrifty almost. How can you be smart? How do you do that in a year where you don't have a lot of dollars to spend this offseason?
Well, I don't know that thrifty is a word I would use in this marketplace. Okay, we've got from $130 to $140 million committed. If you work out the arbitration eligible players, given what the guaranteed commitments already are, filling out the rest of the roster, you're talking about $130 to $140 million.
Right.
That ought to be plenty for anybody. Can it go up from there? Realistically, should it go up from there? Now, in 2012, instead of having about 110 committed in multi-year contracts, we only have 60. So that's an opportunity for us to be very aggressive. Does that mean we would spend all of that money? No, the ideal would be no. We would keep some of that in reserve, not only in reserve for, let's say, a midseason acquisition, but also in reserve for the following year so that we can continue to be in the market. It's almost like buying bonds. You want some short-term, some intermediate, and some long. So you can hedge against the interest rates or whatever. But that's sort of how you have to approach it in baseball too, I think.
You touched on Citi Field a little bit, and certainly, as you mentioned, you have experience, Petco, similar dimensions, and obviously that team just missed making the playoffs this year. Right. Do you feel, though, you had said doubtful to any changes, at least right now. Do you feel, does a team have to be built to the ballpark? Does a team have to be, I mean, you want to be pitching heavy anyway, but pitching heavy, speed, total defense in the outfield. I mean, do you have to build the team to fit this ballpark, or can you just build a team to win?
I think you have to, in a ballpark like this, or a ballpark like Petco, or even a ballpark that has much smaller dimensions, so that it plays small. I think you got to have it in the back of your mind. But I think you can overcorrect also. For example, there are a lot of people that would say that in a ballpark like this, there ought to be a heavier emphasis on defense. And I think that's true to some extent. But look, the infield doesn't change.
Right.
Okay, it's the same dimensions here that it is elsewhere. So in terms of infield defense, I'm not sure that there ought to be any greater importance. Somebody may convince me that that's the case. In the outfield at Petco, it was really important to have a quality center fielder, because that's really where the big part of the ballpark was. Here, I'm not knowledgeable enough to make that comment. But when we talk about defense, I think that you can be selective about that. But the bottom line is, offense is still important, and there's a reason why guys like Cal Ripken, to go back a few years, Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, et cetera, played that position, because it had become a more offensive position over time. That's not to say Bud Harrelson or somebody couldn't have been a shortstop in today's day and age, but that's only if you have 7 or 8 other guys around them.
And it certainly sounds like you don't necessarily need Whitey Herzog's Cardinals to defend this ballpark. You build a team, to win, and you go from there. I get what you're saying. Let's move on a manager. You did touch a lot on it in the press conference and said some very interesting things. You did say that a fiery manager can be desirable. Does that depend on the city? Is say a fiery manager more desirable here, or in Philadelphia or Boston or somewhere like that? Do you feel like it kind of mends to the passion of the fans, or is that just totally bogus?
No, I don't think that varies from city to city. In my view, some manager that has less of a personality, an outgoing personality, less fiery, if you will, that might play in some areas, and it may be the right personality for a young team that's just developing and so forth. But given all the elements of managing a major league team, I think it's real important that a manager be able to, of course, lead 25 players, but also, be a sort of a surrogate for the rest of us who get frustrated from time to time. I had a manager once who just categorically refused to argue with umpires. Just didn't think he was going to change anybody's mind. And I kept saying, hey, it's not about changing the umpire's mind. Right. It's about exercising all of our frustration. So, I think that's true anywhere you play. And it's too bad that guys like Lou Piniella and others are leaving the game, because I think that aspect of their personalities and their managing styles are still important to the game.
Sandy, you've got one more question. I know you have to run. In terms of managing it down to the candidates for interviews, is there a number? I'm sure you're not there yet, but is there a number of guys that you'd like to get it down to have in for interviews? Do you have that in your head? I'm not asking you who, but do you have a couple of guys in your head who you already think you're going to have in?
Well, we have, I would look at it this way. We started with a long list. It's a little shorter now than it was. I would break it down into 2 categories: internal candidates and external candidates. And what I hope is that if we have internal candidates that are truly interested and we think are qualified, we're going to bring them in. I think that's an important gesture, at least, for those who are in the organization. So, and then, of course, we'll have other candidates as well. There's no magic number. Each interview is going to require time, and so logistically that has to be taken into account. But there's no magic number, and I don't know all the guys on the list. No one person here does, and so I don't think we want to narrow it too quickly.
Sandy, I appreciate the honesty and all the great responses. Excellent tie, by the way, and I appreciate that.
All right. Okay. Got it.
Sandy Ellison, guys, gave you a lot to chew on to talk about back in the studio. Let's go back to you.